Peter, welcome to the Z Marketing Podcast, and thank you for coming back.
It's good to be here again, man.
Awesome. Okay, so I'll jump right into it. Um, what are some key differences? You recently launched your platform, of course, that's made a real buzz and a real splash in the PR world. Source of Sources, kind of like the new incarnation of Harrow, Help a Reporter Out, which many of my listeners are familiar with. Curious, what brought that about? How did you come? What prompted you to launch Source of Sources?
Well, I'm a believer that you can never go home again, and I wasn't planning on going home again. And then about 8 months ago, a year ago, I started getting all these emails from people saying, "Hey, your platform isn't what it once was." And I'm like, "Well, that's a shame, but I sold it 14 years ago. It's not really anything I could do about it." And I just kept getting more and more emails. Hey, they've killed this part and they've taken away this part, and again, I still didn't want to do anything. And then it just got to the point where I'm like, all right, I can't, I'm being asked too much. I can't let this go down in flames. Let me see. I can't let it go down in flames. It's not my place. It's not my choice whether it goes down in flames. I don't own it, right? I sold it. But maybe I could do it better. Maybe I could start it again and do it better. And Source of Sources was born at sourceofsources.com. And the basic premise is just like Harrow, 2 or 3 times, just like Harrow was when I started it, 2 or 3 times a day, I'll send out an email with queries from journalists. If there's something in those queries that you can answer, you do so and you get quoted by the media. The difference is I'm much more, just like I was in the beginning when I ran Harrow, I'm much more aware, I'm much more concerned about people staying on topic, pitching the right thing. And now, 14 years after I sold it, not using AI, not automating their pitches, which, it just doesn't work. There's a time and a place for AI. It's not when you're pitching a journalist, you can use AI to help craft your pitch, but you should basically say, hey, write a pitch about whatever, and then send it without looking at it. So I am very anal about that, always have been. Play nice and stick around as long as you want. It's a free service. It always will be. If you want to do something nice, you could donate some couple of bucks to Best Friends Animal Society, but don't play nice and you're gone. And that goes for journalists as well. If they're pitching something claiming to be media and it winds up being a pay for play or something like that, they're gone too. So it works both ways.
Makes sense, right? Because you got to have PR people who are not just grossly self-promoting. They've got to actually have something that actually contributes and is newsworthy, and you got to have reporters that are actual journalists. And is it true that this is really like a free service, or is there a monetizable aspect?
Nope. I want to keep it free. I've always wanted. It was always free when I ran it the first time. It's free this time. My the service makes plenty of money by selling small little text ads. One text ad at the top of each email. Those text ads go to now over 22,000 subscribers. Uh,
Wow.
uh, who run PR firms, who are entrepreneurs. We're about actually 65% small business entrepreneurs, only about 35% public relations people, which tells me that there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there who are looking to get exposure in the media, not necessarily through PR. So there is a lot of room to grow. And again, it really just comes down to wanting to be useful, helpful, and creating things that are beneficial, that make people happy and that do the job they're supposed to do.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I actually first heard of Harrow went from a coach I was working with, and he said, you should get yourself featured in some like some different news outlets, and that's what he was using, and yeah, and then I only discovered you later when I found out about faster than normal and the
Yep.
ADHD content as an ADHD entrepreneur. I appreciate. So the idea of sources. It's obviously much more than simply a resurrection of Harrow. Um, and this sounds like it's a really, really good way for people to get press mentions, build relationships, maybe with people in the media. Now I know you have a strict policy against irrelevant pitches, or you mentioned people who are just copy paste AI
Right.
pitching. What would you say for people who are thinking, hey, I want to use this service, but I want to play by the rules and I want to come up with something good? What would you say is an example of an irrelevant pitch? What's a don't do versus a do? What is something that you see a lot of reporters are interested? If you can share some do's and don'ts, for my
Yeah, I
audience.
mean, the number one rule I've always said is if you have to think for more than 3 seconds about whether your pitch is relevant to journalists, it's not. Right? If you sit there and go, "Oh, I wonder if they'd like this angle," and it's not what they've asked for, it's not relevant. The best advice I can give you is craft your pitch first and wait for the right query to come to you. What do I mean by that? When the queries come out at 5:45 a.m., 1 o'clock p.m., 12:45 p.m., things like that, 5:45 p.m. on Sundays when we do 3, and the speed matters. Speed super matters, right? If you have a journalist who's sending a pitch to 20, or a query to 22,000 people, even if 300 of them read that in the first 10 minutes, and it only fits 10 people, and only 5 of them send good pitches, the reporter has everything they need, right? So speed matters. So have your pitch written 3 paragraphs. First paragraph, here's who I am. Second paragraph, here's why I'm the perfect response, or my client or my company is the perfect response for you. Third paragraph, here's how to contact me. That's it, right? And so have the pitch ready. Not every pitch will be for you, but when you get that perfect pitch, send that email immediately.
Awesome. Sounds like speed and relevance are
Elements are the key to life, right? And they're also the key to source of sources.
absolutely. Awesome. Now, to zoom out a little bit from source of sources, I'm curious, you've been in the PR industry for many years. And PR, though I'm not in PR directly, I'm in the broader marketing advertising industry. And PR is an interesting, subsection. I know some people involved in trying to make PR a little more data driven and smarter. What would you say is the state of public relations in 2020 in 2024? And clearly, PR is not dead, but it's definitely been changed a lot by SEO and now AI. So what's your take on PR today?
No question. Everyone's talking about SEO and how important SEO is and this and that. I would argue that SEO does play a role, but so does being above the fold in the LA Times or the Washington Post or ProPublica or whatever. Actually, you don't want to be in ProPublica because then you're probably in trouble. But you are, PR still plays a role as public relations, as getting media exposure. The premise of just using source of sources or PR as a whole just to get SEO, I think is you're wasting a lot of opportunity, right? There's a lot of things you can do that you're not doing if you're only looking for SEO. So I think that there are a lot of things you can do. Other than that, PR is, has so many benefits, always has. You just need to know where your audience is, where your market is, what they're going after, what they want to hear, what they want to see. You go from there.
So yeah, I agree with you. And you don't subscribe to the point of view I once heard from a strategist like 10 years ago that, oh well, PR is just SEO now. Like, and that brings me to my next question is how should one evaluate the value of a media placement? Are there any data-driven ways PR professionals can measure outcomes of a media placement? Maybe any AI PR tech tools you recommend, or how should someone evaluate, let's say, being in a local or industry trade publication or website blog versus or influencer versus, something more coveted, more cachet, maybe won't always drive leads in as direct a way, but like a feature in the LA Times, New York Times, etc.
Big believer in, I'm a big fan of uh, using Muckrack. Muckrack has phenomenal data-driven tools that allow you to figure out exactly what you're doing, where you're going, how much press you're getting, what the press is, whatever, right? I cannot recommend that enough. it is way too easy to say, hey, yeah, look, I got a cover story and move on. Right? What does that mean? What does that mean to the CEO? The fact of the matter is that I said the same thing about social media 15 years ago. I don't care how good, how viral your meme goes, how whatever. Where's the financial basis for this? Right? Because at the end of the day, you're going to have to explain it at some point to someone who counts beans, right? To someone who says, okay, I laid out this much money. What was the return? And so being able to use the right tools like Muckrack or even some sort of AI where you're tracking, it has never been more important. And it always is. I mean, I remember that was one of the first things I learned was how to value an article. How much is the ad worth? Multiply that by 10, right? This was back in like the 90s, right? How much is the advertising page? How much column inches did you get? How much would that cost an ad? Great. Now multiply the trust factor by factor 10 or 50 or whatever. So there's all those sort of things that you have to do. The question becomes, what's the easiest way to do it? So for me, it's definitely automation tools using, like I said, Muckrack's great. But there's a lot of them out there. You just have to figure out which ones work for you and which ones benefit what you're doing and use those religiously, because you're going to have to be able to show, like I said, show it to people, use them religiously.
Yeah, there's one I'll also mention that, I've had the founder on this show before, Propel. They should probably advertise on your listserv or something. But yeah, there's a lot of different things out there. Muckrack, that's a great one. So now zooming out even further, I'm curious, you laid out your take on the state of PR. Not to get too political or anything, but what do you think is the state of journalism and how we consume information at the moment? I know you're following the current presidential election with great interest. Are you concerned about how AI is disrupting news media, and how do you think this will impact the outcome, maybe of the election or politics or society in general?
I'm not concerned about AI disrupting the news media. I'm concerned about the majority of media outlets out there being bought up by billionaires who have, I can say, a sinister agenda, but their own agenda. In the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, news was the last bastion of civilization. I believe the quote from the newsroom is, we were able to do great things and we were the best country in the world because we were informed, and we were informed by great men. And we were informed not from an opinion standpoint, but from a news and factuality standpoint. And when the first time the term alternative facts was used, I remember just sort of dying a little bit inside.
Same.
Dan Rather and Walter Cronkite and people of that nature would have turned over in their graves. If Dan Rather probably is, he's still alive or dead? I can't. Dan Rather still alive? I feel like he's still alive. Well, Walter Cronkite's definitely turning over in his grave. Point being, there aren't alternative facts. There's the facts, and unfortunately, a lot of those facts have gone by the wayside as various billionaires swoop in and buy up mouthpieces for their own benefit. And unlike Elon Musk, who spent $44 billion to buy a mouthpiece and basically give him global domination, and completely fucked it up beyond all conceivable belief, which I just think is awesome. Some of the people who are buying up these media outlets are doing it rather well. And that's the problem. They're intelligent billionaires. And therein lies the downside. So I don't worry about the journalists. I'm friends with so many journalists who I trust with my life and who are reporting the news when they're allowed to.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's the part that scares me.
Yeah, yeah, and as I understand it a little bit, the history of like radio and things were, I think people were able to advertise. I think the news in the beginning wasn't even I think it was either government supported or people didn't pay for it. It was like you had to be able to to have a station on the radio, you had to have news. But now news has definitely evolved to become a very as we know, consumer,
It sells
customer
ads. It
driven
sells ads.
industry. Yeah.
It sells ads. And that is a shame. You know, you want media to be, I mean, you can trace a lot of this back to the Supreme Court decision for what the hell was it? Citizens United, right? And things like that. But at the end of the day, you want journalists to be or you want uh, the media to be truthful and to be real and to only report the facts again. Subsidize them and all at the same level, and give politicians free airtime. right? The reason we used to have debates is because they weren't sponsored.
Mhm.
Be nice to go back there.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it's good to have on the record what people may be promised in the past versus now. And I know you're up on a lot of, you're always up on like new tech and apps and tools and things. Is there anything that you can recommend that can maybe help us become better consumers of media information and, either contextualize it or be able to discern fact from fiction? Truth from fake news. I know one called Media Matters. I've heard ads for that. Anything you can recommend?
Delete TikTok. Um,
Yes.
find a news source you trust. Find a news source that's valid. And then get outside of your comfort zone, but take everything with a grain of salt. Unfortunately.
Now besides source of sources, I know that you're always into different ventures, jumping out of planes. Any cool projects you're working on in addition to source of sources, or what's next for you?
Well, I launched a company about 8 months ago. I co-founded it with a good friend of mine who's a psychiatrist. She and I launched a company called Mental Capital Consulting. And Mental Capital helps companies attract, hire, and retain neurodiverse employees. That could be employees with ADHD, autism, executive function disorder, whatever. I'm massively ADHD. I was diagnosed about 15 years ago. Prior to that, I was just considered a fuck up, right? Yet I was a fuck up who was somehow starting to sell $1 million businesses. After I got diagnosed, I realized that all of my success is because of, not in spite of my HTML. So, or HTML, Jesus Christ, I just read that online. ADHD. So the goal for Mental Capital is to not only help companies attract, hire, and retain neurodiverse employees, but also to create neuro-inclusive environments where people feel like they can be themselves and they can be more beneficial. Because neurodiverse companies do tend to have higher profits and more higher revenue and more productivity. And
Wow.
53% of Gen Z identifies as neurodiverse. So
Yeah,
companies need to be very aware of that. So far we're working with companies like Adobe, Morgan Stanley, Google, Weber Shandwick, things like that.
that's amazing. Yeah, and I mean, I know there's a lot more focus now on mental health and also diversity in the workplace. And I mean, that's a very having more people who are neurodiverse is extremely important. A lot of us become entrepreneurs and freelancers, which is great, and a lot of us are great at that. But a lot of companies could benefit from that way of thinking. From thinking outside the box, from the
100%,
contributions of.
100%.
Yep, and definitely as more people have identify as neurodiverse and more, there's better diagnoses and things now, that's going to become more and more important. All right, so obviously I'm going to link in the show notes source of sources, and you
And
can
so
maybe send me a link.
mentalcapitalconsulting.com as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm going to feature that in the show notes as well. Last question, not to get too controversial, especially during an election year. But what exactly do you have against cold pizza?
Absolutely nothing.
Really?
Where did I say I had something against cold pizza?
In the introduction to your faster than normal, it says something like, and the man who can't understand why anyone would ever eat
Oh,
cold
no, no, no,
pizza.
no, no. It's not that I don't like cold pizza. It's that cold pizza implies that you had pizza the night before and there was leftover pizza.
Oh,
I've never had leftover pizza in the history of my life. That's not a real thing. If I order a pizza, I eat the pizza.
finish it.
I don't understand people that have leftover pizza or cold pizza.
Okay, that I completely don't totally understand. That
Yeah.
clears up a huge mystery that people were wondering about. Okay, thank you. Yes, because I was gonna say, I try not to leave anything over, but
No,
if
cold
I
pizza is amazing. I
do,
just rarely have it. The only time
yeah.
I ever really have cold pizza is if my parents were babysitting my daughter and they ordered a pizza and put the rest in the fridge, and I come home at 11 o'clock at night and there's pizza there.
Right. And there's breakfast the next day,
Exactly.
and
Well,
you can.
no, there's pizza at 11 o'clock at night.
Yes, that's right. And you can cover it with sriracha. Honestly, pretty good. I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Peter. This was really excellent, and hope to have you on another time soon. And we'll connect.
Anytime, Zep. Thanks for having me.
Take care. Bye.